Hello, guys and girls. Happy February 2021. So, this is going to be my first review of the month when it comes to a romantic comedy, and I'm starting off with a classic, with one of the biggies when it comes to rom-coms. I think one of the early ones that really kind of defined the genre. So this is An Affair to Remember from 1957, and it's a film I watched actually for the first time today, believe it or not. Now, it's a remake of Love Affair, which came a couple of decades before. Same director, I think. I recognise the name. I've not seen Love Affair, so it's something maybe I'll try to get to before the month is out, or certainly soon. And so we've got the classic combination of Cary and Deborah Kerr, and he plays this kind of struggling artist who is to be engaged by this rich socialite, and he meets Deborah Kerr's character on a cruise to New York, where their respective partners are waiting for them, and I guess they kind of have this sort of connection because they're both being kind of taken for granted by their richer partners and sort of being tossed aside a bit, and that's kind of why they're on this cruise alone and why they sort of connect. Um, I think, partly because you've got Cary Grant for the film, but he's kind of this roguish sort of ladies' man. But as the film goes on, we find out more about him, and we find out there's a little more to him than that. She has this sort of richer husband, and we sort of find out a bit about her life. She opens up a bit to the Grant character that she had a bit of a rough childhood, and that she's now got this guy who maybe sees her as this, that she should live this kind of easy sort of lifestyle where he'll pay for everything. Now, one thing I'll say about the film, which kind of subverts the way you would expect these sorts of plots to play, is that actually later on in the film, when we meet the husband and we see some of their scenes together and the rest of it, he actually turns out to be a really solid, nice sort of guy who's actually very supportive of her, and in a way it sort of subverts that stereotype because he turns out not to be sort of a rich asshole basically who just takes her for granted. I'm sure he's been, guilty of that, and that he has taken her for granted and mistreated her a little at times, but he does seem to sincerely love her and is actually respectful of when it becomes clear that she has feelings for this other guy, and he's really supportive, almost beyond the call, really. But that's the setup. It's this sort of mismatched couple, and they have that one thing in connection, really, the fact that they have been kind of tossed aside, and sort of they're married to richer people, and they just feel a bit isolated and taken for granted. There's some, obviously a big selling point is the witty dialogue and some social commentary as well. So there's sort of a funny little line from the Terry character, the Deborah Kerr character, who's a music teacher, by the way. But she sort of has this crack of how it's amazing how these rich companies, they, no matter how much money they lose, they always seem to land on their feet. They always seem to still be rich and make more money. And she sort of makes this comment about how they all come together, how they're always saved by mergers and stuff, and it's sort of a funny little social commentary that has dated really well, because nowadays mergers are everywhere with things like banks and what have you, and it's one of those things where, regardless of whether it actually works for the companies, it very rarely works out for the customers. It actually, this is a side thing, not really relevant to the review, but it's just something that struck me, the fact that mergers are such a big part of the business world today, and that certainly from the customer point of view, it very rarely works out as being a good thing. But that's aside anyway. But yeah, let's talk a bit about the characters and stuff, and dialogue, their relationship, because it's a really smart film, a really smartly written film. The dialogue and the interactions, it has some of that classic screwball romantic comedy feel to it, and great sort of banter. And I think the reason this pair in this casting works so well and they have such good chemistry is because one thing I'll say about Cary Grant is that he plays sort of oddballs surprisingly well, and quite uptight but also endearing characters. I mean, he's definitely very charismatic, very roguish, and it's a big thing in this, the way the film opens with him, because you are set up to think, oh, he's a ladies' man, he's sort of roguish, he's very shallow, he doesn't really have feelings for these women, and and stuff like that. But that's actually an interesting starting point, because then as the film goes on, you see that there is more to him than that, and there has to be more, otherwise you wouldn't engage, you wouldn't be invested in the romance between him and Deborah Kerr. But it's sort of funny, because I was watching Bringing Up Baby earlier on the stream, which is up on the channel now, but he actually does play sort of oddballs pretty well. He's actually like convincing in those kind of roles. And one thing I picked up on watching this film is that he's actually very, the character is very kind of cynical about life in general, and about, I don't know, about just the world and stuff. And it's almost like maybe that's why he does continue to get involved with women, and have affairs and live his sort of lifestyle, because maybe he just thinks it doesn't really matter anyway, things are meaningless and stuff like that. And he meets his match in Deborah Kerr, her character, the Terry character, and she kind of whips him into shape, kind of thing, and he realizes this is true love. This is what I've been missing in my world, my life. And I think it's almost chalk and cheese casting, which is why it works so well, because you're used to Deborah Kerr playing these kind of really steadfast, dominant sort of characters, really smart and on the ball. And so it's almost like this, if she was too similar to Cary Grant, then it wouldn't work so well. But because she's kind of the opposite to the way the roles he plays, then that's why they really gel so well. And it really explores these characters and has a lot of fun with them. And I think in a way it sort of shows them as both outcasts, because there's this quite painful to watch scene when they're on like the cruise, and everybody's just watching them because they've seen them like enter the restaurant together, and they're sort of avoiding things, and it's because obviously he's in the public eye because of who he's engaged to, so he doesn't really want to be seen with another woman, so they kind of pretend that they don't know each other, and it just makes things worse because there's more eyes on them. So it's almost like they're being put under the spotlight. But yeah, I think her being able to trust him and her being cynical of him and just calling him out on some of his BS is a big setup for the film, and the way things change and she actually sees another side to him, and how he changes, I think, through her, because there's a line early on when one of the other characters on the cruise asks him to play cards, and he says, no, sorry, I'm a cheat, it's an addiction, sort of thing. And he's obviously referring to his life, his character as well as cheat, not just cheating at cards. But she does become his match, and she, as I said, sort of calls him out on his sort of lifestyle and what have you. And there's so many memorable lines from this film. I think one that stood out, which is quite early in the film, is when she kind of says, "Well, what did your nurse read you when you were a kid? Was it the Memoir of Casanova?" Which is, yeah, that's such a brilliant line. But yeah, they go on this journey. At one point, they stop over because there's a sort of a break in the cruise for a day or something, and he actually takes her to meet his grandmother. And it's one of these things where she's expecting, because when he says a woman, she's like, "Oh, it's another one of you girls, is it?" And he says, no, it's my grandmother, and takes her, and it's this beautiful scene because it's in this really beautiful setting, and it turns out it is legitimately his grandwoman. His grandmother. But I think what's good about the scene is that from her point of view, it's like this question mark of, is this a facade sort of thing? Is this? And I think it's getting into some of the differences in the genders in a way where the woman might constantly question, because it's this sort of character, it's this kind of smart aleck, roguish sort of character. You might constantly question, well, is this just a facade to get me to like him, rather than showing his true self? And that's why it works so well visually, because it's such a beautiful setting and everything, and you get this performance on the piano with the grandmother, and it's so well filmed, and the scenery is really beautiful. The music's really memorable in this film as well. It's very sort of dreamy and really captures the imagination. Really striking, scenery and cinematography. So one thing that dates it a little bit is later on when they have their first kiss. Now you see they do get a proper kiss at the end of the film, but when they first kiss, it's you see, it's on the stairwell in on the ship, and it's actually just, you just see the bottom half of their bodies in a way. And I didn't know if that's because the Hays Code was still around there. I mean, I guess maybe not, because they do actually kiss at the end and you see it, but I don't know, I sort of thought by the late 50s that might have been removed anyway. It could have been maybe a cheeky comment on that, but I wasn't too sure. But I think looking back, it's maybe just it's this idea that they have to kind of do this in private. They have to try and, it's because I think certainly for a while both of them see this as an affair, as a fling, as a bit of fun, not something which they're going to continue later. But this is, for a romantic movie, I think this really ticks all the boxes. I was really invested in the relationship, really great dialogue. There's some beautiful musical scenes later on as well, because obviously she's a music teacher. There's this scene where she's performing in a club. There's this great scene near the end where she's like taking her class, and you just have this performance, and it's just showing you like the positive impact that she has on children and the people around her. And another thing I'll say about that scene is that sort of marks for diverse casting, really, because you do see not just white children, you do see like African American kids as well, and probably for this era that was quite rare to see diverse casting like that. So that's something that's worth pointing out. But there's actually a really sort of sad scene quite late on where obviously the grandmother has passed away, and we see the Cary Grant character, the Cary Grant character, where he's alone. Then basically Nicky, that's his name. I had to remind myself, and it's almost like, because it's at this point where him and Deborah Kerr have gone their separate ways, and he thinks he won't see her again, and now he's lost his grandmother. So it's like just this sad little moment where he feels this emptiness and loss in his life, and because he doesn't have either of these great women anymore. Obviously it works out in the end, but there's this sad sort of moment, actually, this, well, not moment, but this dark turn later on in the film, which, again, I give it credit for, because in this sort of film, which is reasonably, well, it is sort of like a mainstream type film, and a lot of it is probably what you would expect, but it actually does take a dark turn when they're supposed to meet up on the Empire State Building, which of course is a famous scene, and it's a scene which is like sort of recreated and played with a bit in Sleepless in Seattle, which is another rom-com I really enjoy and I'll be doing later in the month. Not sure if I do it on the stream or just a review. I might do both. We shall see. But it did impress me, actually, than they did in this sort of film, that there was a darker sort of turn later on. So impressive stuff, but very good. It's my first viewing, as I said, which makes it hard to really rate, but I can see why this is held up as a classic, and I think for the most part it holds up. There might be one or two scenes that date it, but overall I think it's very strong. And I'll give it 8.5 out of 10. I won't quite go the full hog and, go up to 9 or 10. I think it may go up on further viewings because this is my first time, but I enjoyed it a lot, yeah. Cary Grant and Deborah Kerr worked their magic, so it's all good stuff. And if you're a fan of this movie, then let me know in the comments. Let me know what you think of it. And also you can suggest other romantic comedies I can watch this month. You can also suggest kind of alternative rom-coms as well, which is something I'm going to do this month. But you can look forward to lots of live streams and reviews during the month. So thanks for listening, and I'll see you guys again soon. Goodbye.